Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
Good morning, Mike. Good morning, peoples.
Good morning, Internet. Welcome back to our podcast. This is a recorded episode. Let's be very clear. We had some scheduling things happening, as always. People got to do things, go places, and we can't always do all of them live. So this one is a pre-recorded episode. So you're more than welcome to help chat in the chat window, ask questions and things. But just be aware, Tommy and I probably won't be monitoring the chat as closely today because we'll be doing other things.
I'll be in an indoor water park for my daughter's birthday.
Oh, okay. That's a great excuse.
So I'm enjoying the podcast, but we're gonna have some fun. Wisconsin.
All right. Yeah, exactly. You don't get to do that really anywhere else.
No.
Wisconsin's everything indoor, especially around now. It's cold right now.
Dude, we got the snow, and I think Wisconsin definitely realizes, well, you got like a week and a half of good outdoor pool, so we're gonna build a bunch of indoor ones.
It's true. Very true. Let's go into our main topic today. So just very quickly here, this is a mailbag. There's going to be a topic around here, just around Fabric, right? We're kind of trying to, as more and more things continue to roll out into Fabric, and as we continue to see features get refined and get added into the Fabric ecosystem, there's probably some questions around what roles or what people's roles need to be available inside Fabric. And so really the topic today is around, is Microsoft Fabric too complex or is it too simple, right? Too complex for engineers, too simple for engineers, but too complex for a data analyst, right? Or analysts that you would look at. So that's going to really be our main topic for today. But before we get into that, Tommy, do you have any news or any beat from the streets?
I do. And this is around data catalogs, or I want to say the myth of a data catalog. So
okay.
I don't know if you get a lot of requests, and I'm getting a ton of requests about, hey, can we build a data catalog? We want a data catalog. And one thing I've been asking before we start those projects is, can you define for me what you think a data catalog is?
That's a great question to ask.
Because the thing is, if you were to actually Google this, look on Wikipedia, ask your AI systems, there's 1,000 ways to slice and dice it. And it can be incredibly complex for companies or organizations who are still at a maturity level of 100, where they're talking like, well, we need metadata and we need, source system and lineage. It's like, well, you're still dealing with things in Excel. So the thing that I've been realizing is a lot of people want the myth of the data catalog. And I don't know, Mike, if you're seeing this, but I'm seeing a ton where people want this idea, this concept of, we know where all our data is coming from. We know how it gets engineered or processed. And so we know exactly and I like to use the member count example, but we like to know how member counts are calculated. We can easily look at it like we were to look at like a recipe. And that sounds great. The idea of that is great, that everything is nicely cataloged, everything is nicely documented. But Mike, I almost feel like this is a myth for most organizations.
Oh man, this is a really loaded question. So a couple of things around your comment. One comment you made there was maturity level 100. I believe you're referring to, so for people who aren't following along or haven't been with the podcast for very long, a maturity level 100 refers to the Power BI adoption roadmap, and there are different levels of maturity. One of them in your data space is a level 100. So it goes like level 100 all the way to level 500, roughly. You can kind of categorize yourself. Level 100 is like, you're just brand new. Like you haven't really done too much rigor around data things. And then typically in these level areas, a 500 level is you have processes involved, you are regularly reviewing it, you have a team that understands the requirements and the specifications, you have a bunch of things that are in place. You are regularly winning at that particular area. And I think to your point here, one point is, Tommy, how are we getting the data catalog? The first thing that comes to mind here is, do you want your data catalog to be actively maintained or passively maintained?
Another great point here.
So the reason I bring this up is this particular point is you can build a data catalog, and I've helped people build a data catalog of sorts inside SharePoint. Hey, here's our documentation. Here's some of our models. We're building a data model, and we're going to take a couple screenshots of it, and we're going to put it here. All the measures get outputted into a list of items that you can just put them, here's the descriptions of them. We now have info.view functions. So if you make a model, you can self-document columns, tables, and measures, and those can just be there. But it requires someone to go in and actually write an accurate, ample description of all the measures, all the columns, all the tables. So I guess my point here is, if you wanted to document every single thing you have, Excel sheets all the way to certified or very widely used data sets, I think you're going to be spending a lot of time just having people write things down and not a lot of time building insights or reports or things that are actionable that you need to go do your business with. So I think it's a balance, right? Of the information that you have in your company that is the most important, that needs to be documented and put somewhere.
So I thought you were going to go a different way when you said the actively maintained thing here, because one thing I mentioned to
Finish my point here before you
okay,
jump on
sure,
this.
sure.
So that part, I think that's where I would, again, I always focus on like what is certified. Let's document those things. Let me go back to the active versus passively monitoring, because I think that's where you're going to go with this next, which is if it's active, that means every time a change occurs, I need to involve a person to go write down the updated metric or whatever those things are, right? Also with that usually means there's not a lot of, let's call it, if I throw content out in there into the company, there's not a lot of opportunity for other people in the company to come back and say, well, this measure worked for me, but it didn't really work here. Or this measure works when I use these dimensions, but not those dimensions. Or, this measure is used in this metric, and it's also used in these reports, right? So there's other people could potentially use these things and find out where these measures are being used across different parts of the organization or in different models and reports. But it's kind of the active part of it's kind of the one person. One person is writing it, documenting it, putting it someplace, and it becomes static. It's not a living piece of document. I think the data catalog is more passively monitored. It's like, what I mean by that is whatever you do, document it in the models, and then have the models like automatically scanned and collecting the measures and the things together. Is there lineage to stuff? Yes, there is. Well, the system itself knows what the lineage is. Can we just self-discover the lineage? Can we just figure out where everything came from and automatically, in a passive way, right? I'm not actively writing the documentation. The tool itself provides its own level of documentation. So that's what I mean by active and passive.
Yeah.
Is that in case you were going to react to that a little bit?
That's really, really close. And one of the things that I said is like, we can build a data catalog, but if you want a data catalog that you and the organization are satisfied with, then there are other things we need to do. To your point, Mike, if the lineage, if it automatically happens, there's a lot of assumptions that things are already built in a certain way. Right?
Yes.
That doesn't just happen. And one of the things is a lot of people want the data catalog, like it's very much that cliche, the carriage before the horse, so to speak, where they want this idea of the concept of the data catalog, but they don't have the data governance in place. They don't have those processes in place because the technology is not going to just magically do it if you don't have the lineage and the data flowing a certain way. If I have things coming from SharePoint and Excel and manual efforts that cannot be seen from the platform,
so how are you going to ever document that? How would you ever know? Like those are things you're not going to know. You're not going to know what people do after. Like you'll know up into the person who does the massive export to Excel. But your process basically falls. So your point there, though, is it more important to have the data catalog, or if you reverse that a little bit and say, well, actually, it's not important to have the data catalog. What it's actually important to do is actually have the process in place.
100%.
To get the information out of people's heads and into, again, this is where I think the certified barrier is a good place to draw the line. You could document everything. I think to your point, Tommy, like if we can get more passive things to scan everything in the whole system, like Semantic Link Labs does a great job of this. You can point to Semantic Link Labs at a workspace and scan all the lineage of the reports to semantic models. You can get all of the semantic model details and information out of them. But if people don't spend the time initially in the process of documenting the columns and the measures in the models they're actually building, then what good is it to you? Like you can look at the output of, like, let's just, to your point, Tommy, what defines a subscriber? Right? What does it look like in your organization? Is that someone who showed up one time and subscribed and now no longer is paying? Does that mean this is someone who's paying for something who's regularly showing up? Like, what does that look like? There's a whole bunch of potential definitions by department of what that means. And you can scan the models and say, this is the calculation, this is the measure that defines that calculation, and you can scan that across all your semantic models. And you can see it everywhere in your organization where that is worded thing or where that column's being taken care of. My point here is, just because you have that information, do you have a system in place that can go get it? Most organizations do not. And then two, what do you do with that information? Like, if I have 7 definitions of the same measure, or what we think is the same measure, how do you go back to a central either body or governing, or how does the organization align on what is this definition?
Well, let me do you one better with that, because I love that point. You may actually have a quality data catalog as of January 15th, 2025. But without to your point, without a process or some automation, but more importantly to me, accountability and ownership, all of a sudden, a month later, there's weeds on it, because you know why? The way the data gets in changes. So yeah, you can build a data catalog.
Ooh, I like the weeds part. Yeah.
But the problem is it's ever evolving. Like that member count, probably there's some logic that's going to change. It's like, well, we now incorporate this, we bought this company or whatever the situation is.
Yeah.
It updates and changes. So even if you build a data catalog, you say we have our definitions, and maybe you painstakingly went through everything. Maybe we're like, we're not going to do the automation. Well, Mike, a month or two later, or let's say 6 months, if that's not actively updated, well, my friend, we're going to have some problems because we're going to be outdated.
Agreed. All right. I think this is a good beat from the street. And we've spent a lot of time kind of talking around this topic. I don't know if there's any other kind of main points here. If I'm going through, this topic here, I think this is very needed. I think I would also point at, in order to have a good data catalog, you need to have some process in place, or you need to start with the process. Say
100%.
We're going to build a data catalog. Let's start with, what can we do today? What do we have in place right now for our process that helps everyone who's building semantic models? And this gets harder the larger your organization is, because every model builder who's building certified things need to do this. And I think this is one of the, when you read the Power BI adoption roadmap, that's one of the major tasks they have in doing that. When you build the Power BI adoption roadmap, you look at it going, hey, I need to make sure that I have the ability to have a gate to say that some data set is certified. One of the requirements to gate something into a certification, because I can limit the amount of people that can actually say this is approved to be certified. One of the features in that gate is, have you documented the model? Do you have the measures and the columns documented so people know what you're doing? To me, that's a nice, clean way to measure that. And then now you can actually run APIs to go say, grab all of my semantic models of the ones that are certified, how many columns are documented or not documented. This now becomes a KPI that you use to talk to the organization, like, how good are we at our process? So put the process in place, make sure it's part of your rigor, measure it, and then do things about it. That way you know when to speed up. Hey, we're at 99% completeness. Great. Keep on building, people. You're following the process. Oh no, we're at 50% or 75% completeness.
Right.
That's not acceptable for certified things. Let's slow down the development of new stuff and step back and find out where is the places that we need to document and add more information to help people use things.
Yeah.
The whole goal is to get people to use more of the Power BI.
Right. I love that. And that's all. That's really the biggest part. I think I have a topic here I'm going to put in on our little board for future episodes. But have you been using at all, speaking of definitions, I have this great macro and I think, I don't remember who actually developed it, but I kind of modified it. It basically, I choose my measures. I asked ChatGPT 4.0 to create the definition, and it has this nice business definition with the measure formula underneath it. Using that new the dax.info, or I basically have this table with all the definitions for my measures. It's a great, quick way to get definitions. And I have to admit, those definitions from ChatGPT have been solid. So,
two observations around that. One is, to your point, Tommy, if you can give ChatGPT enough context to understand, it's good at understanding like the formula, how it works, what it's trying to calculate, and provide like that business translation. And again, it's not going to be perfect all the time, but at least it gives you a starting point.
Better than nothing.
better than nothing. So let's give me someplace to read. So another thing here too, I've heard people communicate to me is individuals are more likely to react to something that's wrong than to tend to give you something from scratch.
Ooh.
So let me say that one more time.
Yeah.
People are more willing to give you input or feedback on something that's wrong versus building something from scratch. And I think the reason is, I think this is true. Like, it's hard to get started over like, well, what does this measure mean? I have to understand it. If you can at least get some semblance of an understanding from ChatGPT, and then you can refine it, you still need someone there to make sure it's right and it's accurate and it actually makes sense for what the users will need.
Yeah.
But at least you have a starting point. You have a place to react from.
I'm doing that with my daughter's homework.
I'm doing this more and more. And my wife was asking me the other day hey, I need to write this email about this topic or whatever. And I said, well, throw it to ChatGPT. Tell it like what kind of tone you want to use. What's the main points you want to use? I'm good at writing bulleted lists. I'm not good at writing a lot of fluff. So I use ChatGPT to help me like add some more context around things. And hey, look, I need an email going to this person with this tone, and these are the bullet points I want to convey. Write this in a 2-paragraph sentence or 2-paragraph, statement, whatever. It does a good job of that. But that part I really like about it.
Love it.
Okay. Anyways, really interesting thoughts around data catalogs. I think we could probably do more topics around people and the process part of this. Maybe Tommy, we go dig through the Power BI adoption roadmap and go find some topics around that. Actually, it's not Power BI anymore. It's like the Fabric adoption roadmap, and figure out what we can do there to help people document their stuff. Okay. Well, that being said, let's go over to our main topic today. So our main topic today is a mailbag. We have a question that has come in. And Tommy, since we're down to 2 now, you're going to be our mailbag reader. So go ahead, Tommy, take it away. Give us your best mailbag voice.
Well, and we'll say mailbag reader for now. So we'll see how it goes. This is from, and I'm going to already botch the name, so I apologize, but Shahim Munti. Greg Deckler's recent LinkedIn post about Fabric not being adopted by businesses due to it being too simplistic for data engineers and too complex for data analysts, in his opinion. And he shares a post by Greg and also Sam McKay about Power BI maybe should not be part of Fabric. I think this would make an interesting debate. I have the opinion that Fabric is opening the way for data analysts to become analytics engineers, but from an upskilling perspective, I'm uncertain about how it fares against the likes of Databricks and Snowflakes in terms of being the tool of choice for orgs looking to improve their data ecosystem. And I just want to give that a little context. And I'm just going to read a blurb from Sam McKay and about basically what he's really sharing here and really give context for our conversation today. Power BI saw so much potential in democratizing analytics. Now that vision feel like it's not necessarily the same. I feel like we're stuck between choosing 5 different data storage options and navigating layers of unnecessary complexity. Power BI should not be in Fabric. So these are some very hot topics. And again, it's not, Shahim is looking at these different posts and kind of saying, what do you guys think? But we have these 2 different posts from people who've been in the game for a while that are really kind of voicing 2 things, Mike. One, Fabric is too complex for data engineers who've been in the game, but too simple for data engineers who've been in the game, but way too complex for your normal data analyst. Mm-hmm. And also this idea of, well, maybe Power BI shouldn't be part of Fabric. It is its own entity. So I think without being too extravagant, there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, there is, I feel like there is a wave of kind of maybe about criticism around Fabric and the ability and the need for Microsoft to, why are these 2 things coming together? Why are they being joined? Power BI was great by itself. Why don't we just keep investing in Power BI pieces? And I think this is a fair question to ask, especially now that you've seen the tool for a number of years and kind of been able to unpack a little bit of what the tool is doing here. I think I will disagree very clearly with these 2 opinions. I do understand. I think their points. I think I understand why they're struggling to figure out what is the adoption of Fabric. How is this working? Where does this get placed inside a library of tools and things for the business team to use and build on top of. So I'll give you very quickly here.
Yeah.
I think Fabric is, if I had to step back and kind of give you like the overall summary, what is Fabric happening? What's happening to Fabric right now? There's a lot of Microsoft data products. The data platform has a lot of data products in it. Fabric is the collection of all of those data products into a single ecosystem. That's what that is. Everything that we're seeing right now, we have Custo DBs, which is added to the database system. We have now SQL databases coming from the Azure space as well. We have pipelines, which was Azure Data Factory. So I think if I had to compare, like there's a progression that got us to Fabric. The progression was build things in Power BI, realize, hey, we need better data engineering tools, and we need to bring the data closer to where the Power BI things are. So I really like Direct Lake. I think that's a very strong feature. I think people should use it more. And I'm even finding, small to medium sized businesses immense amount of value for this tool already. And again, I think these points are very valid. I think the point here in the article is talking about when you compare Fabric against the incumbents, right? Snowflake and Databricks, they've had many more years to develop and build out things that are much more robust.
Mm-hmm.
The tools have been developing. They've been having customer feedback a lot longer than Microsoft has. I think you're going to always kind of come up to Microsoft is trying to catch up. There's an ability for them to get to a place. At some point in time, you're going to start seeing the competition being very equal, and you might even see the scales tipping more towards the Fabric space. And this is, I think I would say, I kind of called this one, right? When Fabric was initially released in GA, I said, wait it out. It's going to take about a year for things to kind of really start getting good, and you're starting to see really huge value being produced from this. We're now just rolling into the new year now. We're almost at a full year's cycle of Fabric being GA.
We're a year plus now. That happened in
November.
Yeah,
year and a little bit now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're at a little bit more than a year now, and I mean, to be honest, there was pieces of this that were in the beginning very friction filled. I couldn't do things. I couldn't get data moved around the way I wanted to. There was too many limitations. But now we're seeing all those friction points being removed, and it's becoming easier and easier to utilize the tool. And things that I was finding easier in other tools, such as like Delta Live Tables and Databricks, there is now mirroring that's starting to appear inside Fabric. So it's not the same feature. It's Microsoft's flavor on how they want to do it. But there's a lot of similar features going across here. So that's kind of my initial reaction. That's my initial reaction of like Fabric in general. This is a really good debate, though. Where do you land on this topic, Tommy? Where do you feel like you fit?
So I am going to play devil's advocate for the conversation because there's a lot here that I can totally understand. But I want to preface that with, man, it takes something when I'm diving into something or 100%, I got to be excited for this. And a lot of the things Fabric has done, especially in the last few months, I've been excited for because I'm like, I wish I had that like 6 years ago, man. I wish I had that 4 years ago. This would have been great. This would have helped this situation or this project. But let's rewind a bit. And I think this is really important to do. Let's go 2015 really to 2023, right? Where Fabric was right before Fabric was released or even in preview. Most organizations and companies could survive and thrive with just a Power BI shop. If you were to say business intelligence in an organization, it could be just Power BI. It did not have to be all these other data products. And it worked out really well. You could have a maturity of 500. I'm sure there was some data engineering team the organization must have had. But for the most part, you could survive and thrive with just Power BI. Power BI is not diminished in its feature set. It's not like we've taken Power BI and it's no longer the same product. It's that and more if you were to separate it from Fabric right now. And I think that's a very important distinction to make right now. Yes, we have all these things in Fabric. Yes, Fabric is Power BI and data engineering and data factory and SQL database is great, but it's not like we lost anything with Power BI. So one could make the argument, and I feel like you can make the argument pretty well. If I wanted to, as a Power BI shop, as a BI shop in an organization, or even as a consultant, I don't, that one I'm a little weary on, but let's say more internally, if I wanted just to do adoption Power BI style, I can, and I could, and it can work. And I think that's a really important distinction to make here.
I guess yes, I agree with that one, but I'll also argue here a lot of the like what other alternatives do you have, right? So you
Sure.
know
Okay. Yeah.
like my question here is there's going to be there's always going to be this need for lake housing things, right? So to me, when I look at the spectrum of like where Power BI came from and where it's at now, initially a lot of the Power BI architectures were let's spin up a SQL server, let's
I
put
like where
some
you're
data
going with
there,
this. Mhm.
and then we'll consume the data from the SQL
Okay.
server. And that was a lot of a very common pattern. Hey, I have a SharePoint list. Hey, I have an Excel sheet or a CSV file. Those are the things I was traditionally consuming from structured data. Now I think we're getting into a world, and I've said this for a number of years now, like we're not even there yet, but we're getting much, much closer. Every single application you build needs to have an API. There's going to be a whole bunch of semi-structured JSON structured data that's going to start showing up to your environment for reporting. How do you shape that into good tables and things? Well, there's a lot of existing tooling that works really well with this. Python notebooks, Spark Compute. Like there's other spaces that we're doing really well in this. So as Microsoft, you can do one of two things. You could just sit on your laurels and say, well, we're just going to continue to optimize Power Query. We're going to make Power Query even better. Keep adding features to that one. Or you can say, look, this method of what people are doing in the data lakehouse experiences, right? Snowflake runs on Parquet files. It's on an Iceberg format. Databricks runs on Delta format. These open standards are showing up. The Spark engine is gaining in popularity and can compute more data with less cost. This is becoming a race to the bottom. How can I do all the data compute with less price? How can I do it faster?
Okay.
So all of these things that you're seeing in Fabric, Microsoft had to make a decision. Look, we tried Synapse. Synapse was this attempt to build, they try to keep Synapse and Power BI separate. In them doing that, Synapse didn't really go very well. It didn't get the features we needed. I don't think they're adding any new features to it. They're still supporting it. But Synapse, in my opinion, was like a flop. It was a great
It's like Windows
idea.
10 now.
Yeah, it's like Windows 8 or whatever. I don't know
No,
what.
Windows 10, they officially said, yeah, we're not supporting it this year. So
Oh, maybe
goodbye.
yeah. But it's the idea of like, okay, it works. We're going to continue maintaining it. But like, am I building new architectures with Synapse? Probably not. I'm going to steer as many people as I can towards the Fabric space.
Okay.
They have the Azure Data Factory, really robust, super well built, but they started rebuilding pipelines. So, maybe some of these articles and what, Greg and Sam are pointing at here is a bit of, hey, you already had really good products, Microsoft, and they were already well equipped for those users in that area. Data engineering liked Fabric, Azure Data Factory. It did what it needed to do. If we needed lake houses, we could spin up a blob storage and push the data down there, right? That was fine. But does it need to be a part or so closely coupled with Power BI? I think maybe they're arguing that. They just want Power BI to stand alone. To be clear here, you don't need Fabric to run Power BI.
Right.
I think this is one of the points of these articles that they're missing is you're just complaining about Fabric not being like next to Power BI. Okay, then don't use it. Like go do your stuff somewhere else. Like I use Databricks with Power BI all the time. Not a problem. But if you want optimized costs, I'm not sure you're going to make that decision. If you have very large data and you have very skilled teams in the Databricks space, yeah, do it in Databricks. I don't have any problem with that.
Costs aside, I think there's a disruption here with teams and the people actually using these tools. That's to me, if I were to put my shoes or put my feet in their shoes on where they're coming from here.
Put your shoes in their feet.
Yeah, I
There
put
you go.
I put one pants at a time. So but I think the disruption here is with teams and groups who are now saying you're in the Fabric world. And there's kind of 2 points I have here, and I'll touch on what each of them briefly and see what you think.
Mm-hmm.
One, if you were to take people now saying you're diving into Fabric, you were Power BI, your heart was Power BI, and I think both of us have that. You much more have the you were kind of the liaison between the data engineering world and Power BI. But for a lot of people, like, okay, you're going to do data engineering. Well, that doesn't necessarily jive if you were all of a sudden say Fabric went away and now we're going to have to do Synapse data lake houses and we're going to have to do everything in Azure. You couldn't necessarily make that jump. It would be very frustrating to do that because, yeah, the skills are kind of the same, but it's a very different, it's a much different process. So yes, you're doing data engineering, but really not in the traditional sense. And I think that's one of the issues here. And the other issue is, well, actually, let me stop there. So I think the jump between people trying to say, well, I do data engineering now because I do Fabric
Mhm.
can be very misleading. So I'll pause there before I go to the next point.
I mean, how do you? I guess I would go back to your question that we talked about earlier about catalogs.
Yeah.
Define for me. Define for me the data engineer. What do they do?
Point. That's
Right.
a very good point.
Let's define what that means. Right. If I'm going to just throw out a definition. This may not be right, but I'll just throw out something here. Right. A data engineer is building a process to take data in one form, typically a raw form, groom it into usable data or usable forms, doing things like performing deduplication, doing things like aggregations of data. They're building a process that the output of your data is ready to be consumed by another team or other people, right? If that's what we're doing, right? I'd argue that you could, if that's your definition of what a data engineer is, you potentially could use that definition across people who work in Excel, people who work in Power BI, in Power Query. You could define that. If your definition is loose like that, like let's ignore. And again, this is maybe a bad ignoring there, but let's ignore the training and the skilling and like the IT side of things. Yes, those people, like if you build something, you're data engineering the process. Now, if you want to have that data engineer be a good data engineer, they should have some sort of like, pipeline process, so I can move things through a pipeline. I need to be able to monitor this thing so it works well. I need to have data quality. Like these are other aspects of this role that need to be there for it to be a good data engineer. So yeah. I'd argue if you're an analyst shaping data and bringing it to someone and giving them an analysis, you're doing some level of data engineering. You may not have all the skills that a traditional data engineer does. And then also I would argue like maybe more the traditional data engineering, you're going to look at their resumes, you're going to see things like knows how to work with like big data, knows how to work in Python, knows how to write Spark, SQL. Like there's like very technical code languages that are usually required at the data engineer level. So
that's what I wanted to get to. So
I know. And so like, regardless, people understand I need to change the data shape. Regardless, doesn't matter who you talk to, data engineers or business analysts, they're going to have to change the data shape to some level to get it into something that's usable. Whether or not I use a Power Query or whether or not I use a data flow, whether or not I use a pipeline or even notebooks, right? These are different tools at our disposal to be using these things in front of other people. Do I need to have Delta Live tables from Databricks in order to be a data engineer? Like, so the qualification is like, if you're saying, again, what I feel like some of these articles are pointing out here is just stick with Databricks. It works just fine. Okay. Well, what is it in Databricks that is making you more data engineering than other tools? Well, the answer is that tool offers you different features that are making it easier for you to be a data engineer. They're not adding characteristics of the data engineer that makes you a better data engineer. Just the tooling is different. So you can build updating pipelines. You can build refreshing of things, right? Those things come with Fabric already, and you can do a lot of these things. It may not be as easy as Databricks. It may not have the seamlessness as a Delta Live table. You may have to use mirroring instead and see how that compares, but it might still get you the same result.
So all the words you're saying is part of it sounds like I created a lake house, look, mom, and engineer kind of thing to an extent. Mm-hmm. But I think here's an important aspect of all the things you're saying. So we're throwing around some technical terms, but we're only talking about at this point in time, you and I have only spoke about one aspect, one product in Fabric. And this is where I think the confusion comes with a lot of people, right? We haven't talked about data science. We haven't talked about data warehousing and the rabbit holes those go down. We're only talking about data engineering. Yeah.
We haven't talked about real-time analytics, which is another big aspect of Fabric as well.
So the confusion is I could say in the past, I was a Power BI pro with trepidation because, again, we knew all the tentacles that a Power was saying you're a Power BI pro. Even Mike, our first year we did the podcast, you were not a fan of that term more because of licensing, but because
Mm-hmm.
are you Power BI pro in adoption? Are you Power BI pro in report creation? Are you
Yep.
so? And this was just a single product. This whole time we're only talking about whether or not you're an engineer with Fabric, but how can you say you're a pro in Fabric and without saying that you're an expert in all the aspects of Fabric, which I think we've all said is kind of impossible. You can
It's not.
know the terms.
It's not impossible. I think, again, a lot of this was they threw a lot of different tools at me. Even now, right? If you go back, let's ignore Fabric. Tell me you're a
Sure.
tell me you're a data engineer. Data engineers are going to have certain classifications of like what they're good in already. Like even if you
Right.
just went to Azure, it's like go to
Thousands.
Azure, go back to Azure and just say like look, let's ignore Fabric the entirety of it and just say let's just talk about what you know how to do. I would argue a lot of people would know how to do in the data engineering space. They'll know how to work with Azure Data Factory. They may even know how to work with Databricks. But just because you work with Databricks and Azure Data Factory pipelines, it doesn't mean you're a real-time analytics engineer. That's a specification. That's a narrowed area of topic around like that particular use case for that person. So I would argue like it, the we know that Fabric encompasses a lot of things. Are we experts in all those things of Fabric? Probably not. But as time marches on, we have time to get projects and exposure and learn things about these other aspects that they're bringing to our experience inside Fabric. So, yeah, you may need, if you're building something in Fabric and you want the idea of having someone becoming the expert in real-time analytics, well, you're going to go find a data engineer who has prior experience or is willing to understand and learn real-time analytics solutions, and they can bring that knowledge to you. You're not going to go just hire a random, hey, are you a data engineer? Great. Let's hire you. Oh, and by the way, we have all this real-time analytics stuff. You got to learn Kafka. You got to learn, Spark. You got to learn all these other things, and they've never seen it before, right? So there's some level of if that kind of information interests you, go get some training, get certified in it, go out and get some classes, go do the Databricks classes. There's a ton of free information on the internet and or paid information where you can go get certifications on areas to get you familiar with the technology so you can make better decisions around it. I don't want to limit the ability of saying I'm a Fabric engineer based on do you know every little single thing of Fabric? Because I don't think that's going to be possible. I think you're going to have specialists in kind of areas as well, potentially.
So I think I have a way to shed a different light on this, and I'm going to ask you to hire two people, and I want to get your take on what you're looking for.
Okay.
So let's start.
What am I
Yeah.
building?
So I'm leading up to that. So the first
Okay.
one we're creating, and I'm gonna be a little general here for the sake of argument. We're building a business intelligence team in 2025.
Okay.
Our tool is Power BI. What are you looking for in their skills, and are you looking for Fabric in what they currently do at all?
Great question. I would, in order for me to answer that question, I'd actually have to go back and look at what is my team's existing skills, and
Sure.
what is our infrastructure currently looking like and built today, right? This will change depending on what our team currently knows. If I have team members already today that are supporting the BI, and we already have things that are in Azure, we already have things that are in the cloud. Maybe we have lake houses. I could already have a lot of this infrastructure already
Yeah.
existing somewhere else in my organization. If I already have those things, I'm going to be looking for like if I have that skill set on my team, I may not need another person who knows more things about Fabric. However, I need someone with enough familiarity to say, oh, I can shortcut to these things, or I can write code that can make shortcuts automatically so we can utilize our existing data assets. Now, flip side this, right? If my company is less mature in the data platform in Azure space, we have SQL servers on-prem. We have we're smaller data sets. We don't have as much volume of data. All of our systems live inside SQL, and we don't have any APIs that are external to complicated data engineering things. Okay, I could probably get away with a lot more pro and premium per user licenses and use just them as that user. So I really, you're asking a question trying to get to bait me into a certain answer.
No,
And,
because
and I think my answer really depends on like what is my organizational structure and what skills do we have or are we lacking, right? If we're on-prem and we have a lot of SQL servers there that we're trying to move to the cloud, I'm for sure going to try and look for someone who has more cloud experience and more Fabric experience
100%.
because I'm going to want to migrate those other artifacts out of on-prem. At this point in it's 2025, I don't want to be in the business of managing an infrastructure solution. I don't want to manage servers. I don't want to have to go in and apply updates and fix things. There's just so much work with that. And I'd rather spend our team's time on let's just focus on getting the data there and it's always available and let's shape the data into actionable insights. Let's work on optimizing the most efficient way to get the data from where it is to where it needs to be for users.
And there's the crux of it, because I'll give you my answer just to let you know I was not trying to bait you. This was really just to get your take on this, because when I thought of this, my first thought was like, well, no, you could just do Power BI. But as I thought about this, and I was like, I did not like my answer that I had for myself. Because honestly, if I was hiring a team right now, or let's say I was going to bring someone on a Pooley BI, I'm looking, even if it was internal, yeah, I'm going to focus on Power BI, but I'm going to hope they have some Fabric experience.
I'm going to plan, or I want them to at least want to learn about it, right? If nothing else, I'm going to give them time to learn it on their own. But
the distinction,
I need them to have the propensity to go like, hey, in the interview, I'm looking for things like, hey, I love Power BI. I've been doing it for a number of years. It's great. I've been dabbling in Fabric a little bit here and there. I'm not an expert at it, but I've been adding some things and I'm finding it really interesting. I can see the value of it. Okay, great. You would be more likely a candidate for me to hire because you've dabbled in it. You understand the surface area of it. You may not be an expert in all of the things of it, but at least I know you're willing to kind of learn that part of it as well.
And this is the big distinction here. I think a lot of us, including ourselves, and I think a lot in this post, are getting wrapped up in the role of you're a data engineer, you're a report builder, you're a data scientist. No, because honestly, I'm looking for the most efficient ways to do something in data. That's what I've loved about Power BI. And guess what? I may not have a full-fledged Fabric ecosystem set up where we have everything's a lake house and everything's a direct lake, but there are a lot of tools that I can use in Fabric that to me are an extension of Power BI, where I can still live in my Power BI world. But you know what? It's really nice to have this mirroring system. Or you know what? Rather than connecting directly to this API, we're actually storing this data in a database or a lakehouse. That does not require me to be a data engineer. That does not require my organization to shift all of their skills. Yeah, there's a little upskilling there, but that doesn't make me an engineer, so to speak. That just makes me more part of the business intelligence side. Just because I create a lakehouse and my marketing team, all their APIs are now storing the data rather than directly connecting to it in a Power BI semantic model that runs 18, hours a day. Well, now I can store this data. So there's more efficient ways to do something. But I think a lot of people are getting that solution or that approach confused with, well, no, you're shifting. You'll never do Power BI again. You're now a data engineer. And that's to kind of wrap that up. If I'm hiring someone right now, I want them to know the most efficient ways in the Power BI data platform to do things.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that's going to be a continued growth part of this, right? So I think one thing that I find is very difficult right now in Fabric is just there's so much stuff in preview. There's a lot of things that are happening. There's a lot of new features that are coming out. I can see a lot of things on the horizon of becoming fully fledged featured, making it easier for me to load data in. Like, it's in general, the whole experience of Fabric is just getting better, especially over this last year. If you had asked me when Fabric was initially announced as GA, what would I have said to a new customer? I would have said, you know what, let's wait a little bit. Let's wait 3 to 6 months. Let's see how it goes. Let's see how if they can refine it a bit more. Here we are a year later, and I'm saying, for me, the mile marker, if I had a spectrum that said, on one end, I'm talking about Databricks, existing data platform solutions, is all built in Azure. And the other end of the spectrum, I'm looking at just solely Fabric. I think that the line where I would start was heavily towards Databricks in the beginning of this. But as Fabric keeps adding new features, it gets better. I'm getting better reporting. I'm getting more comfortable with it, right? I'm getting closer. The mark is moving farther and farther towards, I'm probably just going to start with Fabric now. And at some point, the solution will be so compelling that it will be, I only want to use Fabric. I don't need to be using other tools. In only special situations do I need to. And I think Databricks and Snowflake are actually very aware of this. I think they're very aware of, like, Microsoft is trying to take over their market share in this area. And I think they're also going to have to be very competitive. This is where I think right now we're at like a 3-horse race, I think, right? It's the Microsoft Power BI Fabric, it's Databricks, and it's Snowflake. And Snowflake is by far the most expensive of the 3 solutions. Like, if you want Snowflake, you're spending a lot of money to deploy it. So we're talking about these teams are going to need to continue to optimize these solutions down to make them the most efficient thing. And this is also the argument I'm making around, like, data flows versus using a Fabric notebook. If you're in Power BI Pro or Premium per user, you can use data flows to your blue in the face, as long as it gets the job done. When data gets extremely large, though, data flows don't perform so well, right? If you're talking hundreds of millions of rows, I've seen data flows just kind of fall over. So it's not bad. It's just, that's a limitation of the way they built the tool. Okay, it's good for smaller, medium-sized data. When you need big scale data, hundreds of millions of rows, where I'm going to store every changed record that comes out of my operational system, I don't want to store that in a SQL Server. It's too expensive. So now the whole reason we're going towards this Fabric route in any direction is we're looking for more efficient ways to do the same work.
And I think that, one, I love that point. You're making me think here, because I almost would argue a bit that Databricks and Snowflake are getting worried about Fabric at this point in time, because to me, Databricks and Snowflake are still the stick shift of data engineering. Like, you go into that, you know what you're doing. That's not I'm going to just start and, my boss tasked me with doing a Databricks solution and we're going to figure it out as we go. Fabric, again, this idea where I have to be a data engineer, or I have to come from that background, or if I do anything in Fabric, then I'm no longer working in Power BI, is, to me, just false. It's misleading, and it's not what Fabric right now I think is intended to be. Yes, can it and do amazing solutions and encompass a lot of solutions, but it's the automatic drive. It works and it can drive and it can go fast, but I don't have to worry about all the setup and all the things that I've had to do from, if that was my background. A lot of people going to Fabric right now are not the data engineers. And this is Mike. This is actually really changed my training. When I started working on Fabric training, it was like, okay, what are the personas? Well, you're a data engineer and you're coming to Fabric, and you're a data scientist, you're coming to Fabric. It's like, no, that's not it at all. Well, at least right now. And again, I'm speaking on January 15th of 2025, or whatever the date is, January, a year into GA. The majority of people that I'm finding that are coming into Microsoft Fabric are coming from a business intelligence and business background more than they're coming from a data engineering background.
I'd agree with this. And I think
very important distinction.
Yes. And this is what I've been saying from day one when Fabric came out. And Tommy, we've argued about this a little bit. I don't agree with the personas that Microsoft has put out here. I think, yes, there's a data engineer, but to Sam's point here, Fabric is light. If you're coming at Fabric with a data engineering perspective, you're not going to get all the bells and whistles you've traditionally had with Microsoft products, or other products for that matter. It's just not there yet. They're continually adding new features. The gap is continually closing, but there are certain things in Azure Data Factory you can't do in a pipeline yet. Okay. However, what's making this compelling for me is there's new features that are showing up, and those new features are Fabric specific. Like, I can't do Direct Lake without Fabric. Direct Lake is amazing. They're doing things inside the Fabric ecosystem that are making it incredibly important. I was having a conversation with someone, and they're asking me, what would make Power BI better for you? And my point blank answer was, I'm doing so much work in engineering of data over in Databricks. I need the lakehouse to be right next to my semantic models. That's what I said. And then 2 years later, Fabric shows up. I'm like, oh, wow, someone was listening. Like, this is not. So, Microsoft looks at their landscape. So they have the privy of being able to see how many people are building Databricks, where the data is going, how many blob storage accounts are showing up. Like, they know where the market is moving, right? So they're probably seeing trends in this market way before we are, because we're on the output of they have to build a solution to actually work, and then we can start seeing the trend. Microsoft sees the trend way earlier than we do. So, what's driving Fabric, or even cloud compute for that matter, right? There's a proliferation of data centers in the US. The cost to run compute in the cloud is continuing to drop, and we need less. It's becoming cheaper for me to run it in someone else's environment at scale than for me to run it on my own on-prem server house, and I don't have to pay for people to run infrastructure. I can remove that cost and move it more towards the analyst and using their brains to manipulate the data. This is the trend we're going to go. So
Right.
I agree with you 100%, Tommy. The people coming to Fabric, more of them, and if you think about it, you will, for every one data engineer that comes to Fabric, you're going to have like 10 analysts that are coming to Fabric. Just think purely about the size of volume of market.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
To go through data engineering, you got to go through specific classing. You're going to go through like maybe information technology major, right? You're going to do things that are specific to that role, right? That's one major by itself. You look at the spectrum of what people live in the business. There's all over the place. Anyone can go work in the business, and like there's a lot of different degrees. There's a lot of different technologies, and sometimes, I mean, this is a good example of Seth, who was on the podcast previously. He was an artist, and he found I like SQL, I like data things, and then moved more towards that route. So while he wasn't a business-centric person, his degree doesn't really need to be information technology for him to work inside Fabric now. And now he's a director. And so, like, wow, that's amazing. But I think the size of market audience, you're going to get more analysts there. And Microsoft is continually building like the low code or buttons experience around doing data engineering.
And to your point, Mike, when you find a Power BI college degree, call me. Let me know when that exists, because it does not. And let's not forget, and this will kind of be my closing thought, Microsoft is always going to go from the simple to the complex. Power BI did not become conceptualized or was created because of Tableau and all the advanced analytical tools. It's because someone looked at what was happening in Excel with Power Query and Power Pivot and said, I wonder if we could do something with this. They were Excel tools. Power BI is literally is a son or daughter of Power Query and Power Pivot that existed in Excel for years before Power BI. That's why we have Power BI. It did not come from, we should do something really advanced and we should create our own BI tool.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. So Power BI was an evolution of Excel, the world's largest data engineering tool already, right? It's already got hundreds of millions of users using Excel. It's a massive program.
As easy as possible to use. It's again the automatic drive. How can we make it as easy as possible to transition?
And to me, the linchpin a lot of this was the analysis services engine. The analysis services engine changed how everyone thought of doing data and analytics. That engine alone, columnar storage, in-memory compute, that's the technology that shifted Microsoft down this path, because that's the analysis services. That was built into Excel. That's where pivot tables came from. Amazing. Now here we are multiple years later, and now we have this fully interactive dashboard that was around. Tableau was there doing it, but this is like a brand new world, and this tool is just, and it's, I have to give a lot of credit to Power BI because it's literally changed my career. I've gone from mechanical engineering and gone into full, consulting mode around Fabric and Power BI. This stuff, I love this stuff. This is great stuff. And I think there's a large need for it.
I'm fired up, man, because my final closing thought is Power BI has allowed people who had no business being in tabular models to work in tabular models in organizations with SQL analysis services engine. And Fabric is just that evolution, is people who had no business, and people have no business to be in lake houses and warehouses to be able to do so. This is not the other way around to me. So, and I'm feeling more and more of that.
When you looked at Power BI 9 years ago, 2015, and it just came out, we were so excited about this new technology. Oh, wow, this is, and I think our initial blush was, wow, this is so easy to get started. It was so easy to like download a desktop for free and start. I could go from some random files that I have into a report that I could click on things and multiple things interact within like a little bit of time. So that started our intrigue with Power BI. They're trying to leverage that same level of intrigue with Fabric. I think the same thing is happening, right? We're in year 1 of Fabric at this point.
We're
early. So what does Fabric look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? right? When Power BI has been out for 20 years and Fabric is now out for another 10 years, right? What does this world look like now? Microsoft is taking a lot of lessons learned from all their other data products and bringing them directly to Fabric. I think this is going to be. I disagree with these topics. I think these two individuals are very critical of Fabric, and I think they're missing the mark. I think they're not seeing, the fact that we're just starting out. This is going to become part of our new workflow and our process. And I honestly think that Fabric will be the go-to solution. It incorporates a lot of other tools into one big solution. I don't have to buy a bunch of stuff. So I think the ease of being able to turn things on is making this a commodity for people. Microsoft is going to try to continue to reduce the complexity, the issues, the challenges, and they want you to deliver value very quickly from your data, wherever that may be coming from. So I really like this. I think this is a good topic. I think this is definitely something to evaluate and always keep critically thinking about. Does Fabric fit for you? Is this a skill set that you want to get into, or is this something that your organization needs? And so my final thought here, basically is, you're going to continue to see more and more analysts move into what I would call an upskilling into data engineer. That will continue to be the common trend. I think as the Fabric tool becomes more rich and robust, we will eventually start seeing more data engineers choosing Fabric over other third-party tools to start their work. But right now, I think we're still at a little bit of a resistance. There's still not quite enough features to make sure that experience is incredibly smooth. So I think we're getting there. It's going to get better. But regardless, I love the fact that I'm seeing monthly blogs with all the new features coming out for Fabric. So if anything, if you want to know what Microsoft is interested in, look at where they're putting their money. Look at what they're building. What features are coming out new? If there hasn't been a new feature in Data Marts in a year, don't use Data Marts, right? It's probably not going to go very long. But if you see them building a lot of features around like Azure Data Factory or pipelines, or like where those new features are coming out from, that's where I want to be spending my time, because Microsoft's investing in it, meaning they're listening to feedback, they're changing it, they're going to try to make it better and better over time. So that's where I'm going to spend my time. I'm going to try and keep myself aligned to the Microsoft blogs and understand what they're building there. And as I continue to see developments, that's going to tell me where Microsoft's putting their money and their development time. Anyways, we really appreciate you listening to this podcast. This is a really hard topic to go through. I think it was good to unpack this a little bit, but thank you for listening. I hope you are exploring more about Fabric as well. And we'd love to know your feedback as well. Give us some comments in the comments below. Let us know what you think about Fabric in your environment. How are you finding easy wins? Do you see more business analysts moving toward Fabric and not as many data engineers excited about Fabric? And over the last year, have you seen that transition shift? Is that changing for you? Maybe. I don't know. That being said, we really appreciate it if you would let somebody else know you like this conversation and you enjoyed the podcast. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. And share with a friend, since we do this for free. Do you have a question, idea, or topic that you want us to talk about, just like today? Well, head over to powerbi.tips/podcast, leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Sam, for the questions and the thoughts around your topics on this one. I don't think I agree with you, but that's okay. We're allowed to disagree.
It's a Shami Mushi, so we want to thank him for the question.
Well, Shami, thank you for the question, but also Greg and Sam, I also want to thank you for your opinions. Like, your opinions were great in this article. Good thoughts, good opinions. I don't think I agree with them, but that's okay. We're allowed to disagree. Cheers. Thank you all. We'll see you next time.